All right, next I'd like to welcome Dave Karow up to the stage. Dave has 3 decades of experience in developer tools, the developer community, and evangelizing ways to make software delivery more sustainable. Currently, Dave is CD evangelist at Split Software. Thank you for coming, Dave.
Absolutely. Fun flight on out. Okay, show of hands. How many of you have a daughter or a neighbor or a niece that's a girl under the age of 10? Okay, so a good number of you. My daughter is 7. She was 6 when I came up with the idea for this talk. So I've worked with and for some amazing women in my tech career, but I actually don't think there are enough of them. And if you look around the room right now, I think I would come to the same conclusion, right? I think we need a different sort of pipeline in order to create more diversity in the workplace. And one that actually makes coding tangible to girls and creates an opportunity for them to develop a tech curiosity, and more importantly, to have that feeling, that sense of mastery. I can do this. This is something I'm capable of. So those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. How many of you remember the dawn of the personal computer era? Okay, if you're under 30, you weren't even alive yet, so you're off the hook, right? But let's take a look back at history before we figure out how to move forward. So first, credit where credit's due. I wouldn't even be giving this talk if it weren't for Angie Jones. She's a prolific dev advocate, does the Test Automation University. I follow her on Twitter, and that's why I knew she had done a talk. And the talk that she did was about teaching girls to code, and it was called Coding Future Coders. And she loves to code so much that she wrote her slides as code in an editor, right? So definitely a talk given by somebody who can code. And in her talk, she had this thing where Floor and Pop had asked on Twitter how old people were when they wrote their first line of code. And the guys on the right there, they basically were about between 7 and 10 when they wrote their first lines of code. And the women were more likely in their 20s or even older, right? And Angie said, well, what's up with the ladies? Why is it that the women were learning like in their 20s or later in their careers, but the guys tended to learn computers when they were young kids, right? So she decided to take a look back at the 80s to see if she could find some answers. And if we look at these, she shared some TV commercials and magazine ads. And what are the patterns here? Mostly men and boys, right? There's a girl in there in the middle, but what is she doing? That's a sister admiring what her brother is doing, right? What the heck, right? So somebody would say, oh, well, the advertisers were just catering to demand, right? And it must have been that only the men and the boys were interested in computers. But why does advertising exist? Advertising exists to create demand, right? So here's, Dorothy Vaughan and Grace Hopper were pioneers in computer programming. They did stuff that men couldn't figure out. And then women were in programming and strong and growing for decades to go. And then in the mid-'80s, they just kind of rolled over and went down while technical careers for other things in women kept going, right? So Angie didn't waste any time placing blame. She decided she wanted to figure out how could she focus her energy on helping girls experience the same joy in coding that she found, right? So I decided to try something in my own world using interests I have, starting at my kitchen table. By day, I'm an evangelist for Split's feature delivery platform, helping teams move faster and more safely using feature flags to manage, monitor, and experiment with gradual feature rollouts. By night, I like to kind of hang out with my family and tinker and build stuff. And one day I saw this kit on Amazon. For $65, you get a tiny computer called a BBC Microbit, dozens of pre-integrated parts, and a dock that has all these projects that take 5 or 10 minutes each. And it dawned on me that I could take that kit and I could mash it up with DevOps principles like small batch sizes, limiting work in progress, and fast cycle time to create a learning environment where kids would actually have fun. 6 and 7-year-olds would actually want to do this stuff. So we dragged out an old Windows laptop, printed out the docs, and started dropping blocks of code in, setting variables to match the pins we were wiring to, and then deploying to the microbit. And if things didn't work, we would make changes, and we would redeploy. And before we took our first break, we'd completed 3 projects. And then she wanted to do the project that had the accelerometer and the servo in it. And she was thrilled to see that the inputs she was doing were being processed by her code and turning into motions, right? And she was pretty excited about that. She was just having a ball. And I was pretty stoked because she repeatedly let out literally shrieks of joy that she could figure the stuff out and was getting it. Because she'd experienced that sense of mastery. She learned that she could code and deploy and test and iterate until the software and the hardware did what she wanted it to. Now, is she going to be a computer science major tomorrow? No, but the point is that by the way, if you got a phone, you can grab this QR code. I'll leave it up there for 2 slides. At that, there's a blog post that tells you how to get the $65 kit, the docs, and the editors, and you can try this yourself. I invite you to sort of adapt this idea and use it in your own world. But the reality is that we don't actually have to let history repeat. We can actually play a part. We can each play a part, however small or big, in shaping what happens in the future. Thanks for your time.